They say justice is blind, but on a sweltering Tuesday in Macon, Georgia, justice didn't just turn a blind eye. It pulled the trigger. When Sergeant Grady Finch stepped out of his cruiser, he saw an easy target. A 72-year-old woman armed with nothing but a gardening trowel. He thought he was the predator. He thought he held all the cards. But he made one fatal miscalculation. He didn't check who was coming down the driveway. He didn't know that the woman he was about to execute had a son who didn't call the police for help, because he was the kind of man the police called when the world was falling apart. This isn't just a story about tragedy. It's a story about what happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object. And the ending? You won't see it coming. The heat in Macon, Georgia, has a way of settling on your skin like a wet wool blanket. It was 2:15 p.m. on a Tuesday, the kind of afternoon where the air is so thick you have to chew it before you breathe it. Hattie Mae Robinson didn't mind the heat, though. She had lived in the small clapboard house on Elm Street for 43 years. She had raised 3 children here, buried a husband here, and now she was tending to her babies, a row of blue hydrangeas that were the envy of the entire neighborhood. Hattie was 72. Her movements were slow, deliberate, and full of a grace that only comes with age. She wore a floral print dress that had seen better decades, and a wide-brimmed straw hat to keep the relentless sun off her face. In her gloved hand, she held a small, rusted gardening trowel, digging shallow holes for the fertilizer she meticulously mixed herself. The neighborhood was quiet. Most people were inside, hiding in the air conditioning. The only sound was the distant hum of traffic from the interstate and the rhythmic shuck-shuck of Hattie's trowel turning the earth. Then the silence broke. A police cruiser, black and white with the aggressive block lettering of the Macon Police Department, rolled slowly down Elm Street. It didn't pass by. It slowed to a crawl in front of Hattie's house, the tires crunching menacingly on the loose gravel near the curb. Inside the car sat Sergeant Grady Finch. Finch was a man who wore his badge like a crown and his gun like a scepter. He had been on the force for 15 years, and his file was a thick stack of justified complaints: excessive force, racial profiling, verbal abuse. He was the kind of cop who looked for trouble where there was peace. Beside him was Officer Kyle Bennett, a rookie with only 6 months on the job. Bennett was 23, fresh-faced, and still believed in the motto written on the side of the door: to protect and serve. "Look at that," Finch muttered, chewing on a toothpick. He nodded toward Hattie. Bennett squinted. "Look at what, Sarge? It's just an old lady gardening." "Loitering," Finch said, his voice flat. "She's in her own yard," Bennett countered, nervously tapping the steering wheel. "Is she?" Finch shifted the car into park. "We got a call about a suspicious person in the area. Fits the description." "The description was a 6-foot male in a hoodie, Sarge," Bennett said, his stomach tightening. "Descriptions are fluid, Bennett. You learn that with experience. Now watch and learn." Finch kicked his door open. The sound was sharp, aggressive. He stepped out, adjusting his belt, his hand resting instinctively near his holster. He didn't walk. He swaggered up the driveway. "Hey, you!" Finch barked. Hattie didn't hear him at first. Her hearing aid was turned down low to dampen the roar of the cicadas. She continued digging. "I said, hey!" Finch shouted louder, stepping onto the grass. Hattie started. She turned slowly, her eyes wide with confusion behind her thick glasses. She saw the uniform, the badge, and the scowl. She instinctively smiled, a reflex of a generation taught to show deference to authority to survive. "Good afternoon, officer," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Can I help you?" "Drop the weapon," Finch commanded, pointing at the trowel. Hattie looked at the small shovel in her hand. "This, baby, I'm just tending my flowers. I live right here." "I didn't ask for your life story. I said drop the weapon and step away from the bushes, now!" Finch's hand unsnapped the retention strap of his service weapon. Bennett had exited the car now, rounding the hood. "Sarge, come on, it's a trowel. She's older than my grandma." "Shut up, Bennett," Finch hissed without looking back. He took another step toward Hattie. "You deaf! Put it down!" Hattie, confused and frightened by the aggression coming from a man she had never met, took a step back. "Officer, I don't understand. I'm Hattie May. Everyone knows me. I'm just—" "She's resisting!" Finch shouted, mostly for the benefit of the body camera he hadn't yet activated. "Drop it or I will light you up!" I'm putting it down," Hattie stammered. She bent her knees to place the trowel on the grass. To Finch, the movement looked wrong. Or maybe he just wanted it to look wrong. Maybe the heat had made him irritable. Maybe he just hated the way she looked at him, not with fear, but with pity. "She's lunging!" Finch yelled. "Sarge, no!" Bennett screamed, reaching out. It happened in a blur, but for Hattie, time seemed to freeze. She saw the black metal of the gun rise. She saw the sun glint off the barrel. She didn't think of her life. She thought of the peach cobbler sitting on the counter inside, cooling for her son. He was coming home today. He promised. Pop, pop. 2 shots. They didn't sound like they do in the movies. They sounded like a staple gun slamming into dry wood. Hattie May Robinson crumpled. She fell backward into her hydrangeas, crushing the blue blooms she had nurtured for so long. The bright floral dress began to stain dark red across the chest. Silence rushed back into the neighborhood, heavier than before. Bennett stood frozen near the cruiser, his hands on his head, his mouth open in a silent scream. Finch stood over Hattie, his gun still drawn, his chest heaving with an adrenaline rush that felt sickeningly like triumph. "Suspect down," Finch said, his voice shaky but defiant. "She had a weapon. You saw it, Bennett. She lunged." Bennett stared at the small, rusty gardening tool lying in the grass, 3 feet away from Hattie's hand. He looked at the elderly woman gasping for air, her eyes staring up at the harsh sun, fading. "She was gardening, Sarge," Bennett whispered, horror dawning on him. "You just killed her." "Call it in," Finch snapped, holstering his weapon and looking around to see if any neighbors had emerged. "Officer needs assistance. Suspect down. Ambulance. Now." But before Bennett could reach for his radio, a low, guttural roar began to vibrate the asphalt of Elm Street. It wasn't a siren. It was the sound of a high-performance engine, a customized V8, approaching fast. A matte black Ford F-150. Raptor tore around the corner. It didn't slow down. It mounted the curb, crushing the mailbox, and screeched to a halt in the middle of the lawn, just yards from where Finch stood. The dust settled. The driver's side door opened. Step by step, a pair of tan tactical boots hit the grass, then dark cargo pants, a tight black t-shirt that struggled to contain the muscle beneath it. Elias Jericho Robinson stood up. He was 6'4", built like a fortress, with skin the color of deep mahogany, and eyes that looked like they had seen the end of the world and survived it. He was a Tier 1 operator, Delta Force, recently returned from a deployment in a place the government wouldn't admit exists. He had come home to surprise his mother. He had come for the peach cobbler. Elias didn't scream. He didn't run. He stood by his truck, his eyes scanning the scene with the terrifying, computer-like precision of a man trained to process threat environments in milliseconds. Target 1, officer near the car, young, panic in eyes, holstered weapon, non-threat. Target 2, sergeant, standing over the body, hand hovering near weapon, aggressive posture, primary threat. The asset, Hattie May Robinson, supine, 2 thoracic wounds, agonal breathing. Elias's world narrowed down to a single point of focus. The bag of gifts he was holding dropped from his hand. It hit the grass with a soft thud. Finch saw the man. He saw the size of him. He saw the way Elias stood, relaxed yet coiled, like a viper waiting to strike. Finch's hand went back to his gun. "Stay back!" Finch yelled, his voice cracking. "Police business! Back away!" Elias didn't speak. He began to walk. He moved with a fluidity that defied his size. He ignored Finch's command. He ignored the gun pointing at him. He walked straight past Finch as if the officer were a ghost, kneeling beside his mother. "Mama," Elias whispered, his voice breaking the terrifying calm. He pressed his massive hands over the wounds, applying pressure, his movements efficient, practiced, desperate. Hattie's eyes fluttered. She looked up, her vision blurring. "Eli?" she wheezed, blood bubbling at the corner of her mouth. "You made it." "I'm here, Mama. I'm here," Elias said, tears cutting tracks through the dust on his face. "Stay with me. You hear me? That's an order, Hattie Mae. Stay with me." He hurt my flowers, Eli," she whispered. And then her eyes fixed on the sky. The tension left her body. The chest stopped rising. Elias froze. He checked her pulse. Nothing. He checked again. Nothing. The silence that followed was different. It wasn't the silence of heat or shock. It was the silence of a vacuum before an explosion. Elias slowly removed his hands from his mother's chest. They were coated in her blood. He looked at them. Then he stood up. He turned to face Finch. Finch had his gun raised again, aiming at Elias's chest. "I told you to step back. Get on the ground, now!" Elias looked at the gun. Then he looked at Finch's eyes. "You didn't just kill an old woman," Elias said. His voice was low, a rumble of tectonic plates shifting. "You just declared war." "Get on the ground!" Finch screamed, his finger tightening on the trigger. Elias took a step forward. "Shoot me," he said calmly, "but you better make sure the first one kills me, because if I'm still standing, I'm going to tear you apart." Finch wavered. He had bullied teenagers, drunks, and scared shoplifters. He had never looked into the eyes of a man who hunted terrorists for a living. The fear that spiked in Finch's chest was primal. "Bennett, cover him!" Finch yelled, but Bennett was vomiting in the bushes. Elias took another step. Finch fired. The bullet struck Elias in the left shoulder. It was a flesh wound, grazing the deltoid, tearing through the black cotton of his shirt. Most men would have fallen. Most men would have grabbed the wound and screamed. Elias Robinson simply flinched, his body absorbing the kinetic energy like a stone wall absorbs a pebble. He didn't look at the wound. He didn't stop. The shot seemed to flip a switch inside him. The sun was gone. Jericho had taken the wheel. Before Finch could realign his aim for a second shot, Elias closed the gap. He moved faster than a man that size should be physically capable of moving. He was inside Finch's guard in a heartbeat. With his right hand, the one not bleeding, Elias grabbed the barrel of Finch's service pistol. The heat of the just-fired weapon sizzled against his palm, but he didn't flinch. With a sharp, practiced twist, he wrenched the gun from the officer's grip, breaking Finch's trigger finger in the process. Finch screamed, a high-pitched, pathetic sound. Elias didn't use the gun. He ejected the magazine, racked the slide to clear the chamber, and tossed the weapon onto the roof of the neighbor's house in one fluid motion. Then he grabbed Finch by the throat. He lifted the 200-pound officer off the ground. Finch's boots kicked uselessly at the air. He clawed at Elias's forearm, but it was like clawing at steel rebar. "Please!" Finch choked out, his face turning purple. "Please!" Elias brought Finch's face close to his own. "She was gardening," Elias whispered, the veins in his neck bulging. "She was gardening." "I thought..." "You didn't think," Elias snarled. He tightened his grip. The lights in Finch's eyes began to dim. "Freeze! Police! Drop him!" Sirens were wailing now. The cavalry had arrived. 4 more cruisers skidded to a halt, blocking the street. Officers poured out, guns drawn, shouting contradictory commands. "Drop him or we fire!" Elias looked at the wall of guns pointed at him. He looked at Finch, dangling in his grip, consciousness fading. He looked at his mother's body lying in the crushed hydrangeas. If he snapped Finch's neck now, they would kill him. He wouldn't be able to bury his mother. He wouldn't be able to ensure the truth came out. With a roar of frustration, Elias threw Finch. He didn't just drop him, he hurled him. Finch flew 10 feet through the air and slammed into the side of his own police cruiser, crumpling to the pavement in a heap of bruised ego and broken ribs. Elias slowly raised his hands. His left arm was dripping blood, pooling at his elbow. "On your knees, now!" Elias knelt. He didn't look at the officers. He kept his eyes on his mother. They swarmed him. 5 officers piled onto his back, driving knees into his spine, forcing his face into the dirt, the same dirt his mother had been tending moments ago. They cuffed him with 2 sets of handcuffs because his shoulders were too broad for one. "You're done, dirtbag," one officer spat in his ear. "Assaulting an officer? Attempted murder? You're never seeing daylight again." They hauled him up. As they dragged him toward a cruiser, he locked eyes with Officer Bennett, who was wiping vomit from his mouth. "Tell the truth," Elias said to the rookie. His voice carried over the sirens. "Save your soul, kid. Tell the truth." Bennett looked away. The interrogation room. 2 hours later, Elias sat in a metal chair in interview room B at the 4th precinct. He had refused medical attention for his shoulder. The blood had dried, stiffening his shirt. He sat in perfect silence, staring at the 2-way mirror. He knew who was behind it. He knew the game. The door opened. Enter Detective Harris and Captain Miller. Miller was the precinct commander, a man more concerned with politics and pension funds than justice. "Mr. Robinson," Captain Miller said, sitting down and opening a file. "Or should I call you Elias?" "It doesn't matter what you call me," Elias said calmly. "I want to make a phone call." "You're in a lot of trouble, son," Miller sighed, playing the sympathetic uncle. "You attacked a decorated sergeant. You're looking at 20 years, easy. We found the weapon your mother was holding. The trowel. Finch says she sharpened it. Says she came at him like a maniac." Elias's jaw tightened, but he remained stoic. "A sharpened trowel. That's the story." "It's what the report says," Miller shrugged. "And we have a witness. Officer Bennett corroborates the story." Elias closed his eyes for a second. The kid had folded. "Here's the deal," Miller continued. "We know you're military. We respect that. We don't want to ruin a vet's life. You plead out to aggravated assault. We drop the attempted murder charge. You do 5 years, maybe out in 3, with good behavior. We bury this. Everyone moves on." Elias opened his eyes. They were cold. "You think you can bury this?" "It's already buried," Detective Harris interjected, sneering. "Who are you?" "Just another angry guy from the wrong side of the tracks who couldn't handle his temper. The media won't care. Crazed vet attacks hero cop. That's the headline." Elias leaned forward, the handcuffs straining. "I want my phone call." "Who you gonna call?" Harris laughed. "A public defender?" "No," Elias said. "I have a specific number. By law, you have to give it to me." Miller sighed. "Fine. Give him the phone. Let him call his mama." "Oh, wait." The room went deadly silent. Harris snickered. Elias stared at Miller. He burned the man's face into his memory. "Remember that joke," Elias said softly. "Remember you laughed." Harris slid a phone across the table. Elias picked it up. He didn't dial a lawyer. He didn't dial a family member. He dialed a number that was 13 digits long, an encrypted satellite line that bypassed the local switchboards entirely. It rang once. "Secure line. Identify." A computerized voice said, "Sierra 117, auth code, Delta X-ray 9er, requesting immediate extraction and legal intervention. Situation critical, code black." There was a pause, then a human voice came on the line, a voice that commanded entire fleets. "Jericho? This is General Shepard. We thought you were on leave. What's your status?" "I'm in handcuffs, General. My mother is dead, executed by local law enforcement. They are fabricating evidence. I need the team." "Where are you?" "Macon PD. 4th Precinct." "Sit tight, son." The General's voice turned to steel. "Do not say another word. The cavalry is coming." "And Jericho?" "Sir?" "Give them hell." Elias hung up the phone and looked at Captain Miller. "Or you have about 30 minutes, Elias said. 30 minutes for what? Miller asked, confused by the strange phone call. "To resign." Captain Miller looked at his watch. 28 minutes had passed. He smirked, leaning back in his creaking office chair, the springs groaning under his weight. "Well, Mr. Robinson," Miller said, his tone dripping with condescension, "your 30 minutes are up. No cavalry, no black helicopters. Just you, me, and a long bus ride to the state penitentiary." Detective Harris chuckled, tapping his pen on the metal table. Maybe his general got stuck in traffic. Elias didn't blink. He didn't look at the clock. He looked at the vibration in the glass of water sitting on the table. Ripples, concentric circles starting to form, growing more violent by the second. "It's not traffic," Elias said softly. "It's a rival." Outside, the atmosphere of the 4th Precinct shifted instantly. The front desk sergeant, a portly man named Reynolds, dropped his coffee mug. It shattered, but the sound was swallowed by a deafening roar that shook the ceiling tiles loose. Through the front glass doors, Reynolds saw them. 3 black Chevrolet Suburbans with government plates screeched to a halt in a V formation, blocking the main entrance. Behind them, a massive Bearcat armored vehicle crushed the precinct's flower bed. But it wasn't the vehicles that made Reynolds' blood run cold. It was the men. 12 operators spilled out of the Suburbans. They weren't wearing standard SWAT gear. They wore multicam trousers, rolled-up sleeves revealing tactical watches and scars, and plate carriers with no agency identifiers, just American flag patches. They moved with a terrifying, fluid synchronization, weapons at the low ready. Leading them was a man in a sharp gray suit that couldn't hide the military bearing beneath it. This was Colonel Marcus Vance, Rétimpior, Ceriza, now a high-level liaison for the Department of Justice, specializing in military assets. Reynolds scrambled for his radio. "We have a situation. Armed men out FR. The front doors exploded inward. Not from a bomb, but from the sheer force of the entry team breaching the lock. Federal agents, nobody move. Hands where we can see them." The precinct lobby turned into chaos. Local cops, used to being the bullies, froze. They were outgunned, outmaneuvered, and outclassed. In the interrogation room, Miller jumped to his feet as the commotion penetrated the soundproof walls. "What the hell is going on out there?" He reached for the door handle. It flew open before he could touch it. The door didn't just open. It was kicked with such precision that the lock mechanism disintegrated. Captain Miller was thrown back against the wall by the impact. 2 operators swept into the room, their suppressed HK 416 rifles scanning the corners. "Clear left! Clear right!" Then Colonel Vance stepped in. He looked at Miller, who was gasping for air, then at Elias. "At ease, Sergeant Major," Vance said to Elias. Elias stood up slowly, the handcuffs still on his wrists. "Took you long enough, Marcus." "Traffic was a bitch," Vance replied dryly. He turned to Miller. "Captain Miller, I presume?" "Who the hell are you?" Miller sputtered, trying to regain his composure. "You can't just barge in here. This is a sovereign police station." Vance pulled a folded document from his jacket pocket and slapped it against Miller's chest. "This is a federal warrant issued by the United States District Court, Southern District of Georgia. It authorizes the immediate transfer of custody of Sergeant Major Elias Robinson to federal authorities. It also authorizes the seizure of all digital and physical evidence related to the death of Hattie Mae Robinson, pursuant to a Department of Justice investigation into civil rights violations. And, Vance paused for effect. Domestic terrorism. Terrorism? Harris squeaked from the corner. It was a shooting, just a shooting. When you execute the mother of a Tier 1 Delta Force operator who is currently classified as a national security asset, Vance said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, you don't get a murder charge. You get the full weight of the United States government crushing your little kingdom. One of the operators stepped forward and used a pair of heavy bolt cutters to snap the handcuffs off Elias's wrists. Elias rubbed his wrists. He walked over to Miller. The captain was trembling now. The reality was setting in. This wasn't a local lawyer he could intimidate. This was the end game. I told you, Elias said, leaning down so his face was inches from Miller's. You should have resigned. Get him out of here, Vance ordered. We have work to do, and Miller. If one file is missing, if 1 second of footage is corrupted, I will personally see to it that you serve your time in Leavenworth. As the team escorted Elias out of the room, he stopped at the door and looked back at Detective Harris. "Where is she?" Elias asked. "Who?" Harris stammered. "My mother." "Where is her body?" "County morgue," Harris whispered. Elias nodded. "Do not touch her. Do not perform an autopsy until my independent pathologist arrives. If you cut her open to hide your bullet tracks, I will come back. And next time, I won't be in handcuffs." The war room was set up in a requisitioned conference room at a nearby Marriott hotel. The Delta team didn't trust the local FBI field office. Small towns talked, and they knew the blue wall of silence ran deep. Elias sat at the head of the table. He had showered and changed into fresh clothes, jeans and a black polo, but his eyes were still haunted. He hadn't slept. He wouldn't sleep until Finch was in a cage. "Status report," Elias said, his voice gravelly. Specialist Cohen, a 20-year-old cyber warfare prodigy with messy hair and glasses, spun his laptop around. "It's worse than we thought, Top. I hacked the precinct's internal server. They tried to scrub it, but they're amateurs. They used a standard delete function. They didn't overwrite the sectors." "Show me," Elias commanded. "Okay, so here is Sergeant Finch's body cam log," Cohen explained, pointing to a timeline on the screen. "See this gap? From 2:14 p.m. to 2:25 p.m. The file is listed as corrupted data, but look at the metadata size. It's 1.2 gigabytes. That's not an empty file. That's video." "Can you restore it?" Vance asked, leaning over the table. "Already did," Cohen smirked. "But here's the kicker. Finch didn't just try to delete it. He sent a copy to a private email address first. Subject line, "Got another one." Then he deleted the local copy. The room went silent. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. "He kept it as a trophy," Elias said, his voice void of emotion. It was a statement, not a question. "Looks like it," Cohen confirmed, and he sent it to a Proton Mail account. "We traced the IP. It belongs to a private forum, a Blue Lives extremist message board." "Play it," Elias ordered. "Top, you don't want to see this," Vance warned gently. "Play it." Cohen hit the spacebar. On the large projector screen, Hattie Mae Robinson came to life. She was humming a gospel tune, digging in the dirt. The camera jerked as Finch exited the car. The audio kicked in, Finch's aggressive breathing, the gravel crunching. The room watched in horrified silence as Finch escalated the situation for no reason. They watched Hattie's confusion. They heard her polite, trembling voice. Asterisk. "Baby, I'm just tending my flowers." Then the command. "Drop the weapon." They saw Hattie lower the trowel. It was clear as day. She was complying. She was putting it on the grass. And then the lunge that never happened. Finch fired. The camera view jerked as the recoil hit. Hattie fell. Elias watched his mother die. He didn't look away. He didn't cry. He memorized every frame. He memorized the angle of the sun, the way Finch's shadow fell over her body, the callousness of his voice afterward. "She lunged. You saw it, Bennett." The video ended. Elias stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the parking lot. His hands were clenched so tight his knuckles were white. "That's murder one," Vance said quietly. "Premeditated, depraved indifference. We have him." "It's not enough," Elias said, turning around. "The rookie, Bennett." In the video, he hesitated. He wanted to stop it. "He's an accessory," Vance argued. He stood there. "He's the weak link," Elias countered. "Finch is a sociopath. He'll lawyer up and claim self-defense, say the video angle is deceptive. He'll drag this out for years. I want it over now. I need Bennett to flip. How do we get him?" "We don't," Elias said, grabbing his keys. "I do." The Starbucks on 4th and Main Officer Kyle Bennett sat in the corner booth, staring into a cold cup of coffee. He hadn't been to work in 2 days. He called in sick. He couldn't stop seeing Hattie's face. He couldn't stop hearing the sound of the shots. He felt a presence before he saw it. The light seemed to be blocked out. He looked up. Elias Robinson slid into the booth opposite him. Bennett jumped, his hand going to his hip, but he wasn't wearing his gun. He was in civilian clothes. "Jesus, you're out!" "I'm out," Elias said. "And you're in." "Look, man, I can't talk to you. I can't." "You have a daughter," Elias said. "Maya, 3 years old. Goes to Sunshine Daycare on Pine Street. Cute kid." Bennett's face went pale. "Is that a threat?" "No," Elias said, placing a photo on the table. It was a picture of Hattie holding a baby Elias 40 years ago. "It's a comparison. That woman you watched die? She loved me as much as you love Maya." Bennett looked at the photo, his lip trembling. "My team has the video, Kyle," Elias lied, or told a half-truth. He didn't say which video. "We recovered the deleted footage. We know she put the trowel down. We know Finch lied." Bennett put his head in his hands. "He said she lunged. He wrote it in the report. If I go against him, you don't understand. The union, the other guys, they'll ruin me. They'll plant drugs in my locker. They'll leave me without a backup on a domestic call. If you don't speak," Elias said, leaning in, "you go to prison for accessory to murder. You lose Maya. She grows up knowing her dad watched an old lady get executed and did nothing. Is that the legacy you want?" Bennett began to weep quietly in the crowded coffee shop. "But if you talk," Elias continued, his voice softening, "if you walk into the DA's office with me right now and tell them exactly what happened, you get immunity. You keep your badge, or you turn it in and walk away with your soul intact. I can protect you. My team can relocate you. Finch can't touch you." Bennett looked up, tears streaming down his face. "He's a monster. He laughed about it later. He said he cleaned up the trash." Elias felt a surge of rage, so powerful he almost flipped the table, but he held it down. "Write that down," Elias said, sliding a napkin and a pen across the table. "Write it all down." The leak didn't come from the investigation team. It came from Anonymous, or at least that's what the IP address masking suggested, though Specialist Cohen looked particularly tired the next morning. At 8 a.m. on Friday, the video of Hattie Mae's death was uploaded to YouTube, Twitter, and every major news outlet simultaneously. By 9 a.m., it had 10 million views. By 10 a.m., there were 5,000 people outside the Macon Police Department. They weren't rioting. They were standing in silence, holding blue hydrangeas. The national media descended like vultures. CNN, Fox, MSNBC, they all broadcast live from Elm Street. The narrative Finch had tried to spin, hero cop stops armed attacker, evaporated instantly. The video was undeniable. It showed a cold-blooded execution. The DA's office district attorney, Sarah Jenkins, was a political animal, but she wasn't stupid. She watched the video in her office, her face pale. She looked at the protesters outside her window. Then she looked at the man sitting across from her, Arthur Sterling, one of the most expensive and feared civil rights attorneys in the country, hired by Elias. "This is indefensible, Sarah," Sterling said, smoothing his silk tie. "We have the video. We have Officer Bennett's sworn deposition turning state's evidence. We have the forensic report showing the trowel had no fingerprints on the handle consistent with a weapon grip, only gardening use." "We are preparing the charges," Jenkins said, rubbing her temples. "Not manslaughter," Sterling warned. "First-degree murder and conspiracy for everyone who signed that false report." "That's half the shift," Jenkins protested. "Then arrest half the shift," Sterling said coldly. "Or explain to the cameras outside why you're protecting a death squad." The takedown sergeant Grady Finch was at home, packing a bag. He had seen the news. He knew Bennett hadn't shown up for work. He knew the walls were closing in. He threw a stack of cash into a duffel bag. He had a cousin in Mexico. He could make it if he left now. He opened his front door and froze. He expected police cruisers. He expected the flashing blue lights of his brothers in blue coming to take him in gently. Instead, he saw a single matte black Ford F-150 Raptor parked at the end of his driveway. Elias Robinson was leaning against the hood, arms crossed. He was alone. Finch reached for his waistband, but he had been stripped of his badge and gun pending the investigation earlier that morning. He was unarmed. "Going somewhere, Grady?" Elias called out. "Get off my property!" Finch yelled, his voice cracking. He looked up and down the street. "Where are the cops?" "They're coming," Elias said, pushing off the truck and walking slowly up the driveway. "But I asked them for 5 minutes. Professional courtesy." Finch backed up, stumbling over his own porch steps. "You touch me, and I'll sue. You'll what?" Elias asked, stopping at the bottom of the stairs. "Shoot me? Plant a weapon on me?" Elias took the steps 2 at a time. Finch turned to run back inside, but Elias caught him by the back of his shirt and dragged him down the stairs, throwing him onto the lawn. Finch scrambled backward on the grass, terrified. "Don't kill me, please!" Elias stood over him, a towering shadow. He looked at the man who had murdered his mother. He thought about snapping his neck. It would be so easy. It would feel so good. But then he heard Hattie's voice. "Baby, don't let the hate eat you. You're better than that." Elias unclenched his fists. "I'm not going to kill you, Grady," Elias said, his voice dripping with disgust. "Death is too easy. You're going to a federal supermax. You're going to be an ex-cop in a prison filled with men you put there. You're going to live a long, miserable life in a concrete box, and every night when the lights go out, you're going to see Hattie Mae Robinson." Sirens wailed in the distance. The real police, state troopers and FBI, were turning the corner. Elias leaned down one last time. "By the way," he whispered, "the hydrangeas. I replanted them. They're going to bloom beautifully this year. You didn't kill anything that mattered. You just dug your own grave." Finch began to sob as the FBI agents swarmed the lawn, forcing him face down into the dirt. Elias turned his back on the arrest. He walked to his truck, got in, and drove away. He had a funeral to arrange. The funeral of Hattie Mae Robinson was not a quiet affair. It was a state funeral in all but name. The small Baptist church on the corner of Elm and Martin Luther King Jr. Drive couldn't hold the crowd. Thousands of people lined the streets, neighbors, strangers who had seen the video, civil rights leaders, and military personnel from across the country. Inside, the air was thick with grief and the scent of lilies, and fittingly, blue hydrangeas. Elias sat in the front row, his back straight, his face a mask of stone. Beside him sat his unit, 12 men who had faced down warlords and terrorists, now weeping openly for a woman most of them had never met, but whose cobbler they had heard legends about in the deserts of Syria. Reverend Thomas stood at the pulpit. "We are not here to mourn a victim," he boomed, his voice shaking the stained glass. "We are here to celebrate a matriarch, a queen, a gardener who planted seeds of love in this community for 40 years. And we are here to declare that the harvest is coming." "Amen," the congregation shouted back. Elias walked up to the open casket. Hattie looked peaceful. The mortician had done good work covering the wounds, but Elias knew what lay beneath the silk dress. He placed a single, perfect blue hydrangea bloom in her hands. "I kept my promise, Mama," he whispered, his voice cracking for the first time in days. "I came home, and I'm not leaving until the weeds are pulled." He kissed her forehead. It was cold. That coldness settled in his chest, a permanent reminder of why he fought. The trial. 6 months later, the trial of the People versus Grady Finch began. It was the most watched legal event of the decade. The defense attorney, a slick man named Richard Sterling, no relation to Elias's lawyer, tried every trick in the book. He argued stress response. He argued split-second decision-making. He tried to paint Hattie as a threat, bringing up a 20-year-old noise complaint against her address as proof of a hostile environment. It was disgusting. It was desperate. But the prosecution had a weapon the defense couldn't counter: Officer Kyle Bennett. Bennett took the stand on the third day. He looked older, tired. He had resigned from the force the day after the arrest. He was working construction now, trying to build a life where he could sleep at night. "Officer Bennett," the prosecutor asked, "in your own words, what was Hattie Mae Robinson doing when Sergeant Finch fired his weapon?" The courtroom went silent. Finch stared at Bennett, his eyes burning with hatred. Bennett looked back, unflinching this time. "She was putting down her gardening tool," Bennett said clearly. "She was terrified. She was complying with every order." "Did she lunge?" "No." "Did she threaten Sergeant Finch?" "No." "Why did Sergeant Finch shoot her?" Bennett took a deep breath. "Because he could. Because he was angry she didn't fear him enough. Because he saw a target, not a person." The jury, 12 men and women from Macon, didn't need long. They deliberated for 4 hours. When the verdict was read, guilty on all counts, including first-degree murder, the courtroom erupted. Elias didn't cheer. He simply closed his eyes and let out a breath he felt he had been holding for half a year. Finch was sentenced to life without parole, plus 20 years for civil rights violations. As he was led away in shackles, he looked back at Elias. Elias met his gaze. He didn't smile. He just nodded once. "It is finished. The aftermath." But Elias wasn't done. Justice for Hattie wasn't just about punishing one bad cop. It was about fixing the system that created him. Using the settlement money from the city, a record-breaking $25 million wrongful death suit, Elias founded the Hattie Mae Foundation. Its mission was simple: legal defense for victims of police brutality and scholarships for children in Hattie's neighborhood. He didn't go back to the Delta Force. He retired his commission. "My war is here now," he told General Shepard. Elias bought the house next door to his mother's. He spent his days tending her garden. The hydrangeas grew taller, bluer, more vibrant than ever. They became a symbol. People would stop by just to see them, to leave a card, to stand in silence. One afternoon, a year after the shooting, a young black boy, maybe 10 years old, walked up the driveway. He was holding a small, wilting daisy in a plastic cup. "Mr. Elias?" the boy asked shyly. Elias looked up from his weeding. "Yes, son?" "My mama said you know how to make things grow. My flower is dying. Can you help me?" Elias smiled. It was a genuine smile, the first one that reached his eyes since that terrible Tuesday. "I think I can help you with that," Elias said. "Come here. Let me show you how to mix the soil." He looked at the spot where his mother had fallen. The grass had grown back. The earth had healed. 3 years had passed since the heavy doors of the federal supermax slammed shut on Grady Finch. 3 years of seasons changing the leaves on Elm Street, but never fading the defiant, vibrant blue of the hydrangeas that now stretched across the front of the property. The house had become a local monument, a quiet pilgrimage site for those who knew the cost of justice. Elias Jericho Robinson sat on the wide porch swing he had built with his own hands. The Delta Force operator who had once dismantled insurgencies was now known simply as Mr. Eli to the neighborhood kids. He spent his days fighting a different kind of war, a war against weeds and forgetting. The Hattie Mae Robinson Act had passed in Congress just last week, mandating federal oversight for police shootings and ending qualified immunity for gross negligence. It was a victory written in ink. But Elias knew the real victory was in the soil. It was in the peace that had finally settled over Macon. A gray, nondescript sedan turned onto Elm Street, moving hesitantly. It pulled to the curb in front of Elias's house and idled. Elias set his iced tea down, his instincts flaring, but he forced his muscles to relax. A woman stepped out. She was in her early 30s, clutching a large manila envelope like a shield. She walked up the driveway with heavy, reluctant steps. "Mr. Robinson?" she called out softly. "That's me," Elias said, his voice a low rumble. He didn't stand. "My name is Sarah," she said, her voice trembling. "Sarah Finch." The name sucked the air right out of the porch. Finch, the name of the monster. Elias's hands clenched into fists, the old rage, the Jericho persona, clawing at the back of his mind. "You got a lot of nerve coming here," Elias spat. "I know," Sarah whispered, tears welling. "I haven't spoken to him in 10 years. I changed my name. I wanted nothing to do with his hate." Elias saw the pain in her face. She wasn't an enemy. She was collateral damage. He slowly unclenched his fists. "Then why are you here?" "Because he's dying," Sarah said. "Pancreatic cancer. The prison doctors say he has days." Elias felt a cold, hard satisfaction. "Good. Tell him I hope it hurts." "I did," Sarah nodded, wiping a tear. "But he made me promise to give you this. He said he couldn't die without you seeing it." She held out the envelope. "I don't want his words," Elias said coldly. "It's not just words, please. Just take it, and I'll never come back." Curiosity, or perhaps the need for finality, won out. Elias stood, his massive frame casting a shadow over her, and took the envelope. Sarah turned and walked away without looking back, leaving Elias alone with the ghost of her father. Elias sat back down and tore open the seal. Inside was a folded sheet of legal paper and a small, hard object. He shook it into his palm. It was a rusted metal pin, a cheap, plastic-backed smiling sun, the kind Sunday schools gave out in the 80s. The paint was chipped. Elias frowned, a vague memory stirring, before unfolding the letter. The handwriting was shaky, written by a dying hand. "Elias, I know you hate me. You should. I sit here rotting in this cell, and I know I deserve every second of pain. I am not writing to ask for forgiveness. I have no right. I'm writing because I have to say it before the dark takes me. My lawyer told me to stick to the script. Self-defense. He said if I told the truth, the jury would think I was insane. But you need to know. That day, I didn't stop my car because she looked suspicious. I didn't stop because of a description. I stopped because I knew her. 32 years ago, I was 10. My name was Grady, but my dad just called me trash. He was a mean drunk. One night, he came home looking for blood. I ran. It was storming. I hid under a porch on Elm Street, shivering, starving, and terrified. A door opened. A woman came out with a flashlight. She didn't call the cops. She reached out a warm, strong hand. She pulled me out, cleaned the mud off me, and brought me into her kitchen. It smelled like peaches. She gave me a bowl of warm cobbler and wrapped a blanket around me. She told me, "Baby, the world is hard, but you don't have to be. You stay soft. You let the love in." That was your mother, Elias. That was Hattie Mae. She let me sleep on her couch. The next morning, she gave me this pin, the smiling sun. She said, "Whenever it gets dark, you'll look at this and remember the sun is gonna rise." I forgot her face over the years. The hate, the power, the job. It calloused my soul. I became my father. But that day, when I pointed my gun at her, she looked at my eyes, not the badge, and she smiled. She recognized me. That's why she said, "Baby. Baby, I'm just tending my flowers." She wasn't just talking. She was calling me by the name she used that night. I killed the only person who ever showed me unconditional kindness. I killed the woman who saved my life when I was 10. I kept the pin in my pocket for 30 years. It was in my pocket when I shot her. I'm sending it back. It belongs to the light. I belong to the dark. I'm going to hell, Elias. And the worst part isn't the fire. It's knowing that in her final moment, she wasn't trying to hurt me. She was trying to save me again. Grady. The world around Elias fell silent. The chirping birds, the distant traffic, it all faded. He looked at the rusted pin in his hand. The smiling sun. He remembered it now. He remembered his mother keeping a box of them in the attic. The irony was so sharp it felt like a physical wound. Hattie Mae hadn't just been a victim. She had been the killer's savior. The man who took her life was a life she had once sustained. Amidst the aggression and the shouting, she hadn't seen a monster. She had seen a lost child. She had tried to reach him with the only weapon she had: love. And Finch, blinded by his own darkness, had destroyed the one person who truly saw him. A single tear rolled down Elias's cheek. "You win, Mama," he whispered, his voice trembling. "You win." He walked down the steps to the garden, past the heavy blue blooms, to the spot where she had fallen. He knelt and dug a small hole in the rich earth. He placed the rusted pin inside. The smiling sun returned to the soil. "Even in the end," Elias said to the flowers, "you were trying to save him." He covered the hole. He stayed there on his knees as the sun finally dipped below the horizon. But for the first time, the darkness didn't feel threatening. It felt peaceful. Elias Robinson finally understood. Hattie hadn't just grown flowers. She had grown grace in a rocky world. And though she was gone, the roots she planted were deep enough to crack even the hardest concrete. "Rest now, Mama," he whispered. "The garden is growing." Hattie Mae Robinson didn't have a weapon. She had a trowel. She didn't have hate. She had a history of love so powerful it could have saved her killer, if only he had the eyes to see it. Her son, Elias, a warrior trained to destroy, found his greatest